Okay, so ghost story number 1, which was actually the first episode that I did on the podcast, and I never know what to do with my hands, so I'm just gonna like destroy my AirPod while I talk. Anyway, this story is one of my grandma's stories. It's probably one of the first scary stories that I remember her telling me as a kid. And before we start it, I'm gonna tell you a little backstory about the story. So my grandma was someone who didn't really like to tell ghost stories or sort of entertain those kinds of things, but she had a lot of experiences, so she would definitely talk about them, but it would take like a lot of persuading from me to get her to do it. So this one, when she would tell it, I was like, I just loved it so much. Okay, so anyway, it takes place probably in a setting that looks something like this. When she would tell me about this story, not many of the details would change, so I can pretty much do it word for word, but I might stumble a little bit. But anyway, so the setting for it is like an East Tennessee mountain road. It would have been sometime in the late 30s, early 40s, probably early 40s. And I don't know what season it was in. I wish I would have asked her specific details like that, but I didn't. I'm gonna go with probably warm enough to be outside walking. So maybe fall. We'll go with fall. But anyway, so the story goes like this. Okay, so she had a pretty large family of brothers and sisters, all, pretty close in the same age range, and like, some neighbor kids that they like hung out with. And they would walk from the town that they lived in, which was like a rural mountain community, to another town that was a little bit larger, so they could go watch movies in a theater there. So they would walk on this road in the mountains. And she said that this happened like multiple times. So on one occasion, they were walking back and they heard horses running behind them. So like the hooves of horses. This is hooves. Just running behind them. And she said that it was actually so forceful that they didn't even look behind them. They were just like, their natural instinct was just to get out of the way. So they actually took off running off of the road and like jumped up on a fence and then, looked back behind them and there were no horses there. So she said it happened, a couple times, but they never could see any horses. But they would always be able to hear these invisible horses like galloping towards them. It might not be the right word, but basically running at them on this road. So the biggest event that they had though was they were had been at the theater and they were walking back, so it was dark and or like dusk. Part 2, sorry, I'll get better about running out of time. So on this night, they were coming back from the theater and it was starting to get dark outside. The sun was going down, and it was a group of the siblings, of boys, girls, and maybe some neighbor friends. And at this point, the groups had kind of split up. So the girls were kind of in the back and the boys were, kind of walking ahead in the front. And basically, they kind of got separated. So they were not really within talking distance of each other, but they could still see each other. Well, the girls first heard like horses coming, or like a singular horse this time coming by. So this man on one horse, a black horse, she said that he had on like a long jacket and he was just all dressed in black and he had a big black hat and he just held his hand on the hat like this. And so they couldn't see his face and he just like slowly rode by on his horse. So she said that they were like, what the heck is this, right? So they take off running up to the boys and they're like, did you see him? Did you see the guy? Because at this point the boys had gotten further ahead, so they couldn't just like, it's getting dark too, so they couldn't kind of see where everybody was at. So they run up and they're like, did you see him? Did you see him? And the boys are like, no, we have no idea what you're talking about. We didn't see the guy in black. Like, we have no idea. So the only group of kids that saw him was my grandma and the girls that were with her. And this time, it wasn't a whole bunch of horses running at them. It was just the guy casually on his horse riding by. So no idea who he was, no idea where he went. It was one road, one way on, one way off. The boys didn't see him, only the girls. And this is sort of the last occasion that she talks about the man on the horse. So I don't know if all the events before were like the lead up to him finally showing who he was, but no one really knows who he was. So it's probably one of my favorite stories just because it's so mysterious and I can see it in my mind. Like, I can see a road and like the horse. It's just really easy to put together visually. And it's just scary enough because no one knows who the mystery man on his horse was. Probably never will.